When you blow your load without thinking about it, there's going to be some consequences because of it. And no, I'm not talking about what you're thinking I'm talking about. I'm talking about financial policies with the U.S. Federal Reserve that are literally just like saying, screw it, we're going to blow our load everywhere, anywhere, and everywhere, while, of course, creating a very horrible economic picture and projection for everyone else. To talk about that plus a lot more, we have John Sneisen, economic historian, to join us about all the latest information happening all around the world, and also specifically the situation that happened in Cyprus in 2013 that we should all be aware of. Now, John, there's a lot to get into, especially with all the latest news coming in right now from Russia, where we are getting information that Russians recently withdrew $13.6 billion in cash from their local ATMs. Around 1 trillion rubles was taken out of ATMs and bank transfers in just the past 7 weeks, which again, this amounted to the total that was withdrawn in all of 2019. And we are still just in April, which again makes me kind of wonder and remember, and probably a lot of other Russians remember what happened in Cyprus in 2013, where that country went through an entire banking system collapse. Yes, the situation in Cyprus in 2013 needs to be remembered, needs to be talked about right now, because if you remember, Cyprus was a country that was a safe haven for many Russians because they had very lax tax laws, which allowed a lot of Russian and oligarchs and businessmen and corporatists and globalists to put their money in there, thinking it was safe. Well, it definitely wasn't safe, as of course there was major economic problems in Greece, which signaled major economic problems in Cyprus, and it came out to a situation where Cyprus literally owed more money than they had. They owed more money than their GDP, and the way that they fixed it, well, what did they do? They decided to just take 6 to 10% away from people's saving accounts. They had a national bank holiday, and they said, you know what? Our bank's made some bad decisions, so we're just going to steal your money, take it away, and claim it as ours to pay off this debt that they did. John, you're an economic historian. What are some of the lessons that we could learn from Cyprus, and what are some of the bigger warning signs that we're seeing happening in Russia right now with a lot of money being withdrawn from ATMs?
Well, money being withdrawn out of the ATMs is the bank's worst nightmare, of course. It's called a bank run. And in Russia, if you actually, I ran the numbers. So the three biggest banks, it's Sberbank, VTB Bank, and Gazprom Bank. They have about 26.59 trillion rubles in deposits. And of course, 1 trillion is withdrawn. That would be about for those banks. There's probably more. So we're like looking at maybe 0.5 to 1% of all cash have been taken out of Russian banks, which is extremely significant. But out of the top three, you were looking at 3.77% of their deposits if you calculated just 1 trillion of that. So it's quite significant, and it's actually a huge number when you look at how much money is leaked out of the banks. And of course, they got caught over in Cyprus, where it was Larnaca Bank and Bank of Cyprus at the time that failed, and they had derivative bets on Greek debt to fail. So that's how it actually. There was two banks that bet on other banks to fail, and then they got bailed out, the Greek banks, so they failed in Cyprus on top of this. This is just like, you got to laugh at these banks. But what happened to the ramifications of, we talk about deposit insurance and all this stuff that, it's very significant and very important. And they have a lot of that coming out now through emails, through, commercials on TVs, all this deposit insurance, everything is fine. Keep your money in the bank, all these things that are coming out. So what you see now is a huge push for that. But what happened in Cyprus was that the insured depositors, so the under 100,000 euros, they lost on an average 6.9%. The above 100,000, which is not insured, they lost on an average about 9.9%. But there was people that lost way more. For example, a lady, she was selling her house. She was a retired lady. She wanted to move back to England. She had been, living most of her retirement age in Cyprus. She sold her house, and then the money got stuck in, I think it was Bank of Cyprus, and she lost 50% of that money. 50% of that money that was supposed to, go back and, be her retirement savings for the rest of her time that she was going to be alive. So you see a lot of this happening, of course, and that's where, people are leery now in Russia. They know what's coming. And of course, they might have watched Change the News and other channels, or follow mybankrunwatch.org website, where they actually, can keep updated on, bank runs around the world. And this is, of course, the start of it. And I 1 trillion rubles out of, X amount, you probably, like, that's 0.5%, probably close to, of all the deposits in Russia, which is, hugely significant, because banks, they don't hold a lot of cash. Most banks, if you do cash to deposit ratios now, you can't really do it anymore, because they have cash and equivalent. So on their balance sheet, it shows cash and equivalent together, but the equivalent is actually deposits at their central bank. And the problem is that 99.9% probably of that is digital. So it's not really cash, in physical form that that you can calculate in a proper manner. But even when you do that, you get anywhere between 0.5% the TD here in Canada, up to 10-20%, depending on the banks that I looked at. So it's hugely significant, and severe blow to the Russian banks, and they could be bank runs developing really fast as this continues, because Russia just entered into the COVID crisis compared to others, so they are probably like about half a month behind everybody on what's going to happen. So I think we can see a lot more of this cash being withdrawn out of Russian banks, and that might have severe ramifications for some of those big banks.
Of course, and again, this is important on a global scale. And Russia was one of the first countries to kind of lock down, stop travel from China before anyone else. But now we're seeing a kind of uptick according to their numbers. We're also seeing the Russian government gain more power over its citizenry there. But there's a commercial, there's like this predatory advertisement running on mainstream media a lot. And there's always a saying on it: "It's my money and I want it now." With these like insurance policies, I forgot the exact company that does it, but there's always this famous. There's always these people just screaming, "It's my money and I want it now." And people need to be reminded that's not how the banking system works at all. The bank takes your money, right, and then multiply it and divides it up in multiple different ways, and just gives it off to everyone else. And that $10 that you put in there, it's not in the bank anymore. It's been divvied up hundreds of different ways. I'm not even exaggerating, to of course make money out of money. That's the basic.
Yeah. And on top of that, Luke, there are actually buying assets with that, derivatives, investing in all this stuff. They weren't used to they didn't used to do that in good old savings and loan days. They borrowed money from you, putting in your deposit account, and then they actually lent out X amount on a ratio. That doesn't happen anymore. They actually take your money and then just go and gamble in markets, or gamble in derivatives, whatever they can with it. So today's modern banks are extremely, extremely risky, and that's why I personally, so this is of course my opinion, but it's personally, I take out any cash that I can out of the bank that I don't need to pay bills.
Yeah. There's government agents coming out saying, especially here in the United States, being like, it's safe to keep your money at the bank. Don't keep it underneath your mattress. That's that's very risky. You look at history, keeping your money in the banks is risky. Let's just be honest.
Extremely.
And especially Russian history. I mean, Russian history was very turbulent, and there have been previous crises in Russia where people couldn't get their money out of their own banks. That's because, again, of this like criminal banking financial system. I mean, I've been to Zimbabwe. Still to this day, there's lines down the block to the bank in Zimbabwe. In Mexico, because of also just really poor handling of their money, every 15th and 30th of the month, huge lines, people waiting to get their paychecks. In Venezuela, maximum 20 about what is it, $10 or 20 American dollars, the equivalent of you could get out of the ATM if the ATM was even working. And then there's gang members all around the ATMs just waiting for people to take their money out. Meanwhile, there's government agents walking around to every kind of business and restaurant open, making sure that they follow all these regulations and have huge signs that say gun-free zones. Meanwhile, it was the murder capital of the world, the place that I was at the time that I was there. And truly, the pain and suffering that was done there by just irresponsible financial institutions is just mind-boggling. And if we think it can't come to the United States, you're thinking wrong. You're thinking from a not logical sense. And I've even just released a T-shirt here just a couple days ago. I released a T-shirt saying, "If you trust government, you don't know history," which I think is an important one to understand. That's why I like talking to you, John. You always provide some very important context and highlights that a lot of people don't kind of pick up. But when we look at history, it doesn't really provide us reassuring lessons, especially with our current situation, does it?
No, it's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of bank runs throughout history, and just search up bank runs and go and look at pictures. You'll find pictures from back in the French periods or Dutch banks back in the 1600s. There was even bank runs back all the way back to in China when they had some of their first paper currencies that they had available. So these happens all the time because banks, they like to dabble because nobody wants to keep, this whole banking system is a Ponzi scheme. So what they don't have 100% of your deposits on hand for you to just withdraw yourself. You got to take some of that deposit that comes out. That comes from a whole bunch of wide array of places because there's others that also have their deposits. So if everybody were to take out their deposits, some banks you might only be able to get out, 1% of you that would have it in cash. So that's a significant problem. And throughout history, there's been hundreds of, as I said, thousands of times where they had these bank runs. What is it? It's a Wonderful Life. If anybody has seen that movie here in Canada, everybody watches it for for Christmas. But nobody seems to recognize that it was a bank run through the Great Depression that they were, showing that, what's his name there that is the main character, had where he didn't have the money in the bank, basically. And that's what's happening around the world. And there's several places where there's big cash shortages developing because people are trying to hoard. And what you're going to see now over the next couple of months is people are not going to spend money. They're going to be hoarding them in mass amounts at home. They're going to probably try to hoard as much of that $1,200 check that they had. And at some point, confidence slowly comes back again, and then you're going to start spending it into the economy. And then suddenly that actual inflation that you see in prices might just go through the roof. Now, of course, here in Canada, we have the CDIC, or you have the FDIC in the US, or the financial claims scheme in Australia. Australia just basically covers $20 billion out of $800 to $900 billion of their depositors. In Canada, it's 0.39% of deposits that are covered that are insured. So you can see this whole scam and the confidence game. This is all a confidence game because they put out, all these, as you said, these commercials, saying that everything is fine, which is just pure propaganda because they're deathly scared of you taking your money out of the bank because that will topple most of the banks around the world if you did.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of perplexing situation, especially with everything that's happening now, because either way, we gave our power, our responsibility to these large financial institutions that literally are dangling our futures off of a cliff. And they're like, yeah, well, take your money out. We're going to explode the whole economy if you do that. Keep your money in. We're going to keep making very reckless, irresponsible behaviors with your money that, again, just raise raise us higher over this hill that we're all looking at with saying whole family friendly show. Oh, Shiza, this is not good to say the least. Now, seeing everything in the beginning a couple weeks ago, I was telling everyone, hey, it might be a good time to look at gold and silver. I was telling people, I even renewed my affiliate deal with getyoursilvernow.com. getyoursilvernow.com. But overall, without, I mean, this could even be bigger without even just talking about gold and silver here. I think one of the biggest assets that people need to be reminded of is their relationships with their friends, their family members, and their neighborhood. Even though the financial system is ridden with corruption and is just a scam, the barter system is a system that is time tested throughout human history. Trading resources and services, actual things to one another in a community is something that will, of course, safeguard a lot of people. It actually does something, unlike the banking financial system that literally takes money and makes money out of it. Literally, no service, no manufacturing, nothing. That's all they do. Just print and delve out pieces of freaking paper that are not even there in the bank for you. So out of all of that, grow a garden, create a service, learn to do something that you could trade as a skill. John, you had something else to say, but we're going to be kind of closing it off here. So before you kind of finish your statement, also tell us where people could find out more about you.
Yeah, no, for sure. You can find everything about me at theeconomictruth.org. And there's all my books, all my information, all the videos that I do, links to everything. And then, of course, check out bankrun.org because it's very important, alluding to this video itself. Because bank runs do happen any time throughout history, and we are not immune at this time. So, like, that's what's going to happen here. We like history is repeating itself, and it will again. And if we, listen to these agencies, because it's all a trust game, when that trust breaks in any currency, and that's what you saw when you were in Venezuela, when the trust in the purchasing power of a currency breaks, it's game over. No matter what they try to think, these governments, that they could print money and just on a continuous basis, when the trust of the people disappears, it's game over.
And also bail out their billion-dollar companies and other buddies and other banks like Citadel and Black Cube and all these other ones. I could keep going into it. I mean, the audacity of what's happening right now is absolutely mind-boggling.
And just one last thing, interest rates are apartheid. They are borrowing money at 0%. Meanwhile, they're forcing credit cards down people's throats at 19%. It's such this is modern day apartheid in the financial system. But when you can make money with money, that's the death of any monetary system throughout history, unfortunately.
Yep. Socialism for the super 0.01%. Everyone else will, as you said, pretty much apartheid, pretty much financially speaking, of course. That's my take on it. John, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on and have your backdrop. I love history. I'm a big history buff, so I love having these important conversations. The world is changing, to say the least. We're trying to do our best to keep up with it. If you appreciate this video and the information we shared with you, share it with your friends and family members. No one else will but you. And because you guys still do, we're still here. And this is why I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here on wearechange.org.